Good evening, very good evening from Hyderabad Book Press. This is a book launch. This is a webinar of a book launch called Maramuchata. This is a translation of Anis Varoufakis' book, Talking to My Daughter About the Economy. మరముచ్చట తెలుగులోకి అనువాదం చేసింది సుధాకిరణ్. మరముచ్చట హైదరాబాద్ బుక్ ట్రస్ట్ ప్రచురించింది. ఈ పుస్తకంలో యానిస్ వారూఫాకిస్ మొత్తం మానవ చరిత్ర నాగరికతలో జరిగినటువంటి ఆర్థిక సంబంధాల చుట్టూ అల్లుకున్నటువంటి విషయాలని చర్చించేందుకు తన కూతురితో సంభాషణ లాంటి ఒక కన్వర్జేషన్ లాంటి ధోరణిలో రైటింగ్ స్టైల్లో ఈ పుస్తకాన్ని రాశారు. ఈ సాయంత్రం ఈ వెబినార్ మనము బైలింగ్వల్గా నడుపుకుందాము. ఈ సాయంత్రపు సెమినార్ని అధ్యక్షత వహిస్తున్నది రామ్ మనోహర్ రెడ్డి గారు. నా పేరు అనంత్ చింతలపల్లి. నేను హైదరాబాద్ బుక్ ట్రస్ట్కి పనిచేస్తాను. మరముచ్చట అనే టైటిల్లోనే చెప్తోంది. మర అంటే తెలుగులో మెషిన్ లేదా ఇంజన్. ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థ అనేటువంటిది సమాజంలో సొసైటీకి సంబంధించినటువంటి ఒక ఇంజన్ లాంటిది, ఈ సమాజాన్ని నడిపేటువంటి ఒక ఇంజన్ లాంటిది, మర లాంటిది. దానికి సంబంధించిన ముచ్చటనే ఈ పుస్తకం మరముచ్చట. అంటే ఆ రకంగా ఇది టాకింగ్ అబౌట్ ది ఎకానమీ. రామ్ మనోహర్ రెడ్డి గారు గతంలో సీనియర్ జర్నలిస్ట్, సీనియర్ పాత్రికేయులు, గతంలో ఎకనామిక్ అండ్ పొలిటికల్ వీక్లీ సంపాదకులుగా పనిచేశారు. వారు సుపరిచితులు, జర్నలిస్టులు, ద హిందూతో కూడా అసోసియేట్ అయి ఉన్నారు. వారు ఈ సాయంత్రము ఈ వెబినార్కి అధ్యక్షత వహిస్తారు. రామ్మోహన్ రెడ్డి గారు, ఇప్పటి నుంచి మీరే దీన్ని స్టీర్ అవుట్ చేస్తారు. థ్యాంక్ యూ సార్.
Thank you, Anand. Thank you, Hyderabad Book Trust, Geeta, for organizing this event and for the release of this book. Very happy to be here. So over the next hour, we will have talks by 4 people, followed by discussion. After a few introductory remarks by myself, we will have Sri Jairam Ramesh, who will speak for 15-20 minutes, followed by Arnav and Gayatri, 2 students who are interested in this area, this book. And finally, we'd like to hear from Sudhakaran, who seems to have a very interesting background and who has translated this book. Before I invite Sri Jairam Ramesh to make his remarks, I just very briefly talk about the author of this book. One is Yanis Varoufakis. It's not an easy name to turn on Indian tongue. He's a fascinating person. He is an economist by training, originally from Greece, but now he also has Australian citizenship. Trained as an economist, but engaged with politics right from the early 2000s. And most well known, he became member of parliament and served as the finance minister of Greece for less than a year, but it was a kind of tumultuous year, very eventful, because that was a time Greece was in extreme conditions, loaded by debt, and he was a member of left-wing party which had come to power. He has written a book actually about those experiences as finance minister called Adult in the Room. I would suggest, perhaps, I mean, maybe it's too much to ask Hyderabad Book Trust to translate that book also, but that book gives you an idea of the struggles that independent governments have to make with international finance, banks, lenders, etc. And it's an unfortunate story. It ends with, in a sense, Yanis Varoufakis resigning, and then, in a sense, Greece was defeated by the lenders. But but he has, of course, written many technical books, if one can call that, in economics, and he teaches. He's back as a member of parliament now, but as part of another political party. But this book, I think he writes in the introduction that he's enjoyed most writing this book. He wrote it at one stretch over 10 days, and without any references, without any footnotes, everything that you would find a professional economist writing. Now, I have read the English translation, though it was a few years ago. It was quite fascinating in the sense that, you see, the problem today, economists think they know all the answers. They think their subject is a science. They think. And they don't really engage with people whose lives are affected by the decisions that policymakers make on the basis of advice from economists. This is true whether in New Delhi or New York or London or Moscow or Beijing, wherever. There is a greater need, there's a real need for economists to engage with people, explain things, and come down from the rarefied air that they sometimes seem to occupy. And here he makes an attempt. As their English title is Talking to My Daughter About the Economy. So he tries to explain basic concepts of the economy, how the economy functions. And as he says, for somebody who's a left-wing economist, he doesn't use the word capital or capitalism throughout the book. He uses the word market society. So he explains in very simple, of course, it is written for a European audience. So there is more on debt, there is more on lending, etc., inequality. But this is the kind of engagement that more economists should do. And unfortunately, they don't do so. They speak, in a sense, among themselves and to each other. So I'm very glad that Hyderabad Book Trust has taken the initiative to translate this book into Telugu, and really hope that it reaches a much wider audience. I won't say much more. I'll introduce the other speakers when they come in. So let me begin by inviting Sri Jairam Ramesh, who of course knows no introduction. He is formally now a member of the Rajya Sabha representing Karnataka. If I'm not mistaken, he was earlier representing Andhra, but now he represents Karnataka. He was the minister of the last minister of rural development in 2014. And more interestingly, in recent years, he's become prolific in writing books. I've had the honor of discussing two of his books with him, one on Krishna Menon and another on Aksar. Both of them fascinating. The most recent book was on the poem Light of Asia. So he's really a multifaceted personality, if one can say that. So, Mr. Jairam Ramesh, can I invite you to speak for 15-20 minutes or,
Thank
on
you.
the book and around the subject? Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I must begin with an apology that although I represented the undivided state of Andhra Pradesh for 2 terms, for most of the 2 terms, and Andhra for a couple of years, the new state of Andhra Pradesh, after its bifurcation in 2014, I cannot make a public exposition in Telugu, although I understand Telugu pretty well, but I will not be able to read or speak in Telugu, other than stringing a few sentences. So with that word of apology, let me begin by saying that this is a delightful book in English.
Jairam sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. So we display the book to
here it is.
Declare the launch.
Here's the English original.
Please, sir.
Telugu version, and it's very beautifully produced. It looks very readable. The font is very good. So I congratulate the translators. I congratulate the publisher. Now, This book is unusual in many ways. The format of the book, letters to his daughter, it reminds me of India's first Prime Minister, who wrote two books in the form of letters to his daughter. Glimpses of World History was in the form of letters to Indira Priyadarshini on Indian and world history. And Nehru also wrote another book, which is less well known, and this is called Letters from a Father to His Daughter, and this is on natural history, where Nehru educates his daughter, young daughter, on natural history. So Varoufakis takes on the more difficult task of explaining economics to his daughter, and it's a conversational style, and of course Varoufakis came into prominence for 6 months, and Ramano Reddy's already mentioned this. He was finance minister of Greece between January and July 2015, and he became very prominent because he confronted the might of what is called the Troika, which is the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. And the crux of the argument was, which Varoufakis was advocating, was a rescheduling of Greece's debt, and not to have continued borrowing from the Troika, because this would impose an intolerable burden on Greece's society. Now, running through this entire book is the theme of inequality. And just this morning, I was reading a new report that has been issued by Citibank in Bombay, which shows that in the last 10 years, inequality in terms of asset ownership has increased very sharply, both in urban India as well as in rural India. Of course, Varoufakis is talking about inequality in the Greek context. Greece's per capita income is $30,000, measured in purchasing power parity, which is about more than maybe 5 times that of India's. But inequality is as much a problem in Greece as it is in India, and so this book really is not just about Greece. It's about all economies who undergo a process of economic transformation. And it appears to be that one of the inherent characteristics of the economic transformation is an increase in inequality. We have seen this in Europe, certainly, from the experience that Varoufakis writes about. We've also seen this in the experience with China. And of course, we are seeing this with the experience of India. So it's a very unusual book because he demystifies the concept of a market society. It demystifies the relationship of banking with the rest of the economy, and it's written for his daughter. It's not a mythical daughter; it's a real daughter. It's written for his daughter, and therefore he explains in very simple language the economic discourse, which today we are all familiar with, issues of banking, issues of economic growth, issues of inequality, and so on and so forth. So I'm sure the translators themselves, as they read the English version, would have got a sense of simplicity of the language. But simplicity of the language does not mean that there is no profundity of thought. In fact, economists suffer from this disease, that economists think that complexity of language is a substitute for profundity of thought. But Varoufakis, I think, is one of the exceptions to this rule. And the books that he has written, a couple of books, 3-4 books that he has written, has really appealed to a larger audience. I think the other point that Varoufakis makes which is very important, which we tend to forget or take for granted, is that an economy functions in a political system. And economic choices cannot be divorced from political issues, from political choices. And hence, Varoufakis is always talking not just about market economy or market society, but he's also talking of democracy, of democratic values. In fact, he's one of the champions of a new progressive left movement in different countries of Europe. So he reminds us that economies don't exist in isolation of their political and social frameworks, and that really what we have to be doing is really preserving democratic values, preserving democratic systems, and that the answer to the imperfections of democracy is in fact more democracy. In order to have better democracy, you have to have more democracy. And I think that's one of the political messages that he is seeking to convey. So there's an economic message in this book. And I think more fundamentally, there is also a political message in this book. Particularly, and this is relevant in our country because the period of economic transformation and the period of economic liberalization in our country has come simultaneously with a profound shift in political and social values. If you look at the period after 1991, economists herald it as a turning point for the Indian economy. But in many ways, 1991 was also a turning point for the Indian polity and also a turning point for Indian society. So we are seeing economic growth in a framework where traditional notions of political democracy, traditional notions of social justice, social equality are undergoing changes themselves. So I think the message that Varoufakis is giving us through his books is that when we look at economics, bereft of the politics, bereft of society, then we are making a profound mistake. That economic transformation is not just a technocratic process. It's a process deeply embedded in a country's politics, in a country's social systems. And I think that's very important. I mean, for example, I have, it's always struck me, I have been a great advocate of the economic transformation that we went through in the early 90s. But it struck me that this process of economic transformation, while it has certainly had an impact on the economy, in fact, it has had a very adverse effect on the traditional patterns of social equity, social justice, secular values. In other words, the economy has become more open, but society has become more closed. The economy has been transformed, but social values have become deformed in the process. And I think Varoufakis's book is a timely reminder that this is a triangle. There is an economy, there is a polity, and there is a society. And you cannot look at economic issues in isolation of political and social values. So once again, let me thank the Hyderabad Book Trust for giving me this opportunity of rereading. I'd read this book a couple of months ago, but rereading this book, once again, a delightful book. I'm glad that you sent me both the English as well as the Telugu and Telugu translation. All I can do is that it's a very readable, very, very eminently readable, beautifully produced, as I said, very nice fonts, and I'm sure that this will enjoy a wide readership amongst the Telugu-speaking population. So thank you once again, Shashi. Thank you, Mr. Reddy. Thank you, Mr. Geeta.
Thank you, Jairam Ramesh. That was interesting, even if short presentation, as it were. Thank you especially for talking about Varoufakis's discussion of economics situated in politics, which, as you know, that many economists shy away from. In fact, they deny that, the principles of economics can be influenced by politics. That's very important. And also, it was interesting to hear your views on how the change in the economy in 1991 was either coincided with or set in motion other, not very healthy changes, to put it mildly, in Indian society. Well, we can only hope that there will be a different kind of change in the near future in our society. I would now we are joined by two students who would talk about, I hope, the book. One is Arnav, who's in his 11th grade, and contrary to what popular perceptions about students these days, he reads a lot. He's interested in fiction, non-fiction, history, and politics. He's in school, 11th class in Hyderabad. And he will be followed by Datri, who has done a BA in political science from Delhi University. Political science, Delhi University sets off other things in one's mind, but she has finished that and she is now doing her master's in sociology. Her interests are in non-fiction. Both of them will speak for 5-10 minutes or more if they would like to. Arnav, can I request you to start? Afterwards, Datri will speak.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, first of all, for that wonderful introduction, which I'm thoroughly embarrassed for. And thank you for Hyderabad Book Trust for placing me in this panel about this book, talking to my daughter about the economy, which I've read a couple of months ago, but I had the delight to read it again in English as well as Telugu. Now, we see that the economy dominates all other human activities in this day and age. Despite that, we see the common man has a little understanding of what goes on in this realm. Now, Yanis Varoufakis achieves this difficult feat in this book. He demystifies debt, money, commodity, and the economic value of what it plays in our day and age as a whole, and without resorting to that complex economic terms, it's very weird to see that it says a brief history of capitalism, but capitalism word is not even mentioned once in this book. He favors the term market society instead. Now, this book begins with Zenea, who is Varoufakis' daughter, asking a very big question which plagues us. And with that childlike innocence of hers, asking, why is there so much inequality in this world, Dad? Is humanity stupid? Now, Varoufakis, he answered this question to his daughter before, but he himself wasn't satisfied with it. So now he goes back to the beginnings of agriculture for his answer again. Essentially, he differentiates between two things: between a market, which is a place for exchange or barter, and an economy, where something is produced with the help of labor. The human being lived off what nature provided thousands of years ago as a hunter-gatherer. We read this in a history textbook. But there was there were markets, of course, for barter, exchange for food, but there was never an economy. Human labor began to produce food around 12,000 years ago. Through agriculture, for the first time, they were able to produce surplus, which is what remained after consumption. It is this surplus which gave birth and type of rise of an economic system. Now, why is that? Because having surplus meant noting down who gets how much of it, when creating the need for money, writing, bureaucracy, ensuring that surplus is distributed according to the rules, the need, and a law of the surplus was reduced. Now, guarding the surplus against the enemies who try to steal and all of that, and essentially building a type of society and a class system came into place. Now, Yanis points out very beautifully that economists are capitalism's priestly class. Now, as a result, human history has been characterized by ruling elites battling for control of the surplus, while periodically suppressing rebellions from an oppressed working majority who created all of this. Now, Varoufakis argues that capitalism is the most efficient machine ever invented for generating the surplus. Though there is one fatal flaw, it is structurally prone to increasing inequality, which makes it vulnerable to periodic crises. Now, this book ends with a call, democratization of the economic system, where decision making, which is currently controlled by big businessmen and capitalists, as we say, an oligarchy, and this means of production needs to be shifted from the owner class to the working class. Now, that's about the book. Now let's understand what capitalism is. Now, I'm going to make a statement which will probably shock a lot of you, but you are being robbed as you're listening to me. You're losing a big chunk of everything you have created through your hard work. The system that is robbing you is capitalism. Your boss will take advantage of and steal from you every day as you report to work. What you contribute is not being appreciated fully. Now, let me put that into perspective now. Capitalists, what do we think about capitalists? Are they suited up in top hats with a cigar in their mouth and a monocle, burning library books and running a misery factory? No, that's not a capitalist. A person who invests in capital, which is money, to set workers into motion is a capitalist, which means they are acting in the capacity of a capitalist. What they hope to achieve, most people will tell you it's innovation, competition, and all that nonsense. But the truth is, capitalists have one set goal, and that goal is to turn a profit. Profit seeking to accumulate money is just how capitalism works. It's the nature of that beast of a system that has been oppressing the working class for generations and generations. It's capitalism's sole impulse. However, that doesn't make capitalists greedy personally. However, most of them are, but neither good or evil is involved. Capitalists must maximize their profits above consideration, otherwise they'll be eaten up by more smarter and ruthless capitalists. That's how the market works in this day and age. Profit is therefore the lifeblood of capitalism. But where is the profit coming from? And that's where you come in. Quite literally, you fill the void. Profit comes from you. Now, to understand this, let's do a little thought experiment. Now, let's say I owe a chain of buildings, of restaurants, which are full of kitchens and ingredients. Now, however, I don't know how to cook. Let's say I run a dosa house. I don't know how to make dosas. Now, how do I maximize these ingredients and create a profit? Now, let's say you come into the picture. You know how to make very good dosas, and I hire you. Now, I pay you using money which is known as capital. Now, capital serves to set production into motion, as I stated earlier. Now, let's say I spend $1,000 on the ingredients and for the restaurant. And after you work for a few days there, I make 3,000. Not bad. You added 2,000 to my profits now. Now I have, but all the money doesn't go to you. Now I have $3,000. Just the ingredients cost $1,000. Now, if your labor weren't paid at its full value, you would earn 2,000 because you added 2,000 to it. Now that would mean I would break the money even. Now I won't pay you the full price because profits are necessary for my survival. As a result, I wouldn't pay you the value of your labor. I would only pay you $1,000. Now you even might get 1,500, but it doesn't matter what you do, you are still being robbed. Now that's the dirty truth. Though the story doesn't end with this thought experiment, thousands across the world and not even thousands, billions, I should say, are getting richer and richer, and the poor are staying poor. Now, this process, when a boss steals from you, is known as exploitation. Now, we are not using that phenomenon, the difference between production and the wage of an employee, as a very depressing thing. But understand that capitalist economies are characterized by exploitative practices. In this system, the exploitation never ends. Workers are paid less, made to work more, or made to become more productive without raising wages. This is what a corporation is doing currently. When it records profits, you do your best to create more value, but you aren't getting enough in return. Now, as an example, I own many restaurants, but the ruling class are in the thousands, but understand that there are billions of workers. And we need to abolish this system completely. The unionizing is not mentioned, unfortunately, in the book, but we need to understand that the workers need to overthrow the ruling class, or the bourgeoisie, I should say. Now, there is a difference between the workers, the proletariat, and the bourgeoisie. Essentially, the bourgeoisie own the means of production, as well as the workers who depend on their own labor to survive. In capitalist societies, the values created through labor are appropriated by the capitalists. There is no immunity to it. Your job is conditional on your ability to make more money than you earn by your work. Now, consequently, no one is paid their true value in the capitalist system. Their salaries are significantly lower due to capitalism. Taking value for someone is not what profits are all about. Profits are theft, and therefore you are the victim. And we can see this going on in many countries. We see in the United States, especially, the powerhouse of capitalism, and we are not any less. We see the current government selling the entire country, and we see the two big capitalist powerhouses, Ambani and Adani, playing a big role in this. But people ask me again that question, what about the self-made billionaires? We see billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, let's say, who say they are self-made, but how self-made are they? Jeff Bezos, he says he started Amazon in a warehouse with nothing, and in 1, 2, 3, now look at Amazon where it is. But Jeff Bezos started with a $300,000 loan given to him by his father. That's not nothing. $300,000 is nothing, according to him. But that is so much wealth to start a company. Now, even we see Elon Musk, who was bullied in school for being a nerd and trying to colonize Mars. And then again, in 1, 2, 3, as easy as that, he becomes a billionaire. But his father owned an emerald mine worth of slavery, and he And that money came from his father to start this business again. Now, if you earned $50 million in your lifetime, you would consider yourself rich, but you will still be $950 million away from becoming a billionaire. Now we see the wealth gap increasing day to day. The world's 25 billionaires owe as much wealth as the poorest 3.8 billion people. Billionaires get 565 billion richer during the pandemic day to day. We are in a pandemic. Climate is changing. 2.7 billion people do not know when their next meal is coming from. And these people made 565 billion. There is obviously something wrong with the system. Now, as today we see how much a billion is, it's very hard to comprehend, but there is a single person's net worth is as big as an entire country's GDP. Now, what about their, how are their workers is the question. Their workers are in the worst working conditions possible. Now we see Amazon, a few employees were fired for taking bathroom breaks, and they suffer notoriously bad working conditions. Now he makes more in 1 minute than that worker does in 1 year. Now, what is this inequality that we're living? How can we fight this? How can we fight this? Now, many people will say socialism is the answer to this. But whenever the name socialism comes up, everyone's taken aback by, my God, socialism is undemocratic and all of that. But how democratic is capitalism? We see many coups sanctioned by the CIA, the Americans, in Panama, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. The current Taliban was created from a coup, from a coup which tried to overthrow the communist government there. How democratic is the capitalist system? We need to think about that. Now, the workers, they need to unionize to fight this, but they lack a certain education to understand that, oh God, what can we do? We are small, but there is no strength weaker than the feeble power of one. But if they come together, their strength is incredible. We saw that in Vietnam when they drove out Western imperialism with their unionization. But I don't intend on talking to that. But most importantly, this book will help the people, and now translated in Telugu, of course, will help the people of Andhra and Telangana, workers especially. But ఇంకొకటి ఏం చెప్పదలుచుకున్నాను తెలుగులో అంటే, విద్యార్థులకు ఇది చాలా ఉపయోగపడుతుంది. ఈ ఎకానమిక్ సిస్టమ్ ఎలా ఉంటుందో, ఎలా ఎక్స్ప్లాయిటేషన్ జరుగుతుందో వాళ్ళకు కూడా ఇది అర్థమవుతుంది. ఎందుకంటే దే ఆర్ ద ఫ్యూచర్ ఆఫ్ ద కంట్రీ యాజ్ వి సే. బట్ మనం ఇది భారతదేశంలోన సమస్త విద్యార్థి లోకానికి మనం ఒక ప్రశ్న అడగాలి. అదే, విద్యార్థులారా మీరు ఎటువైపు ఉంటారు? మహాకవి శ్రీశ్రీ అన్నట్టు, కొంతమంది కుర్రవాళ్ళు పుట్టుకతో వృద్ధులు, పేర్లకి పుకార్లకి షికార్లకి నిబద్ధులు. అంటే కొంతమంది యువతి యువకులు విద్యార్థులు పాతబడినటువంటి భావాలు వైపు, కేంద్ర రాష్ట్ర ప్రభుత్వం తెస్తున్నటువంటి పాలసీల వైపు ఉంటారా? లేకపోతే అదే మహాకవి శ్రీశ్రీ అన్నట్టు కొంతమంది యువకులు ముందు యుగ దూతులు, భావన నవజీవన బృందావన నిర్మాతలు, అదే మార్క్స్ భగత్ సింగ్ చూపించినటువంటి దారి వైపా, భారతదేశంలో విద్యార్థి సంస్థలు నిర్మిస్తున్నటువంటి ఉద్యమాలు వైపు అది ఈ విద్యార్థులే మనం చూడాలి. దాంతో I don't want to talk much, but this is a basic understanding of the book, and I would like to thank Hyderabad Book Trust again for inviting me, and నేను చాలా ఆనందపడుతున్నా that ఇది తెలుగులో translate చేశారు. I would like to thank Sudhakiran as well for translating this into Telugu, and thank you again.
Thank you, Arnav. Hugely impressed, hugely with both the content and the presentation of your talk, the discussion of capitalism, and also in the Telugu. And as you said, this book, and I hope I can show it again, is something which we hope that students will read, students in college, universities, and elsewhere. And I wish you the best, and I would like to see how, what you write and say as you move through college and later, your understanding of Indian economy and society. Thank you for that excellent
Thank you very much.
talk. I'd now like to invite Gayatri, who I said earlier is now doing her master's in sociology in JNU. And earlier she did her BA in political science. Gayatri, are you there? Would you?
Yeah. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. Thanks for the introduction and also for giving me this opportunity to speak here. And I would like to pick up where Arnav has left, and I'd like to thank him first for giving us a wonderful but brief introduction to the book and also to its contents, and to also talking to us about the workings and the mechanism of how capitalism works, but in a very, very lucid way. When I read this book first, the thought that came to my mind is how lucid this book is, and why are our textbooks not this lucid? Why are our textbooks about economics or any books that the economists have written so far, why are they so filled with jargon? That was the first thing that came to my mind. That was probably a question about the kind of writing about economic structures that was happening around me, probably. But that was the first thing that came to my mind. And probably the first thing I appreciated about this book, even more than its content, is its form, in the sense that it humanizes economy, right? It humanizes economy, and it makes it easier for an average reader to understand the various economic structures. And as Arnav has rightly pointed out, it might be more useful to the students who are engaged, in the study of not just economy, but also any other discipline. It is most helpful to them. And the fact that this book helps the readers grasp the complex socio-economic realities, it makes this book unique. In the sense, it grapples with a complex reality. It talks about the history of capitalism, or as Varoufakis says, the market society. And he also talks to us in a way that is so easy for us to understand without getting intimidated by the complexity of concepts that he's discussing throughout the book. And he does this so well, by involving various anecdotes and various metaphors from the rich Greek history, from rich Greek mythologies, and also from the Western European literature. The one line that has been with me ever since I read this book is when he quotes Oscar Wilde, and he says that a fool is a person who knows the price of everything but doesn't know the value of anything. And that single line with so much profound meaning explains the complexity of the world that which we are living in, right? We know the price of everything. We have commodified everything. We have put a price on everything, but the experiential value, as Varoufakis calls, we are unaware of that value. And that is probably the greatest tragedy that has been linked to the development of capitalism throughout the world, and not just in the Western society. And he begins with a simple question that his daughter asks on why is there so much inequality. And throughout the book, as Jairam sir has also pointed out, this theme keeps running. Like he keeps constantly questioning the readers, like why is there inequality? Why does so much inequality exist, not just in the economic structures, but also in the social and political structures? And that is again one of the defining features of this book. The fact that he does not detach economy and economic explanations from political and from political structures and political explanations. He understands that detaching economy and politics would have dangerous consequences, as he points out in one of the chapters where he talks about the dangerous consequences of apolitical money, in which he tells us that money or the institutions that regulate the supply or demand have they have to choose, they have to make a choice. Either they have to stand in favor of the handful of wealthy rich people, of powerful people, or they have to take a stand for the majority of working class population. And that is something so deeply political in its sense that there is an economist, Varoufakis, who's also served as the finance minister, and he's telling us to never detach political and the economic. And that is something that has stayed with me ever since I've read that book. And it also explains the logic of liberalism in the sense that if you look at the institutional and the academic history of the development of economics, we'll find out that it has been detached from the political, and it was attached to political in the sense it used to be political economy. But as the market society developed, this discipline, which initially used to be so intrinsically linked to political, has been detached from its political counterpart, and now we are just reading economics as if it's impartial, as if it is not touched by the influences of the political or the social. And this probably is one of the greatest points that I find in this book, that which he obviously does not explicitly say, but he keeps on implying it throughout the chapters as the flow goes on. And again, he talks about economy as an engine. He uses beautiful metaphors for us to understand the working of the society and economy broadly. And he says that economy, it's an engine of the society, and debt, he talks about the centrality of debt, which probably a lot less economists talk as we speak. So he says that debt is like a fuel which powers this engine. When he talks about human labor, he says that human labor is the spark which ignites this engine, and it keeps this engine going. And he says of money that the money which we think of, it's the lubricant which which allows the smooth running of this engine called economy. If one has actually when one thinks in these terms, it is easier for us to grasp the interdependency of labor, of commodities, and of money in this sense, right? Because in our classrooms, teachers largely focus on completing the syllabus, and they teach all the subjects. It's not just for economy, but the teachers, they usually engage in an impersonal and dehumanized teaching of all the subjects. And economy also suffers the same fate. We are in the classrooms, the institutions that affect our everyday life, the economic or the political or the social institutions, they are taught to us as if they are abstract, as if they are intangible entities that we cannot understand at all, unless we rely on a specific jargon, unless we learn the methods, and unless we learn certain concepts, we cannot understand the basic working of all these institutions, which I think it's counterproductive in the sense that everyone, even the school-going children, probably of 9th, 10th classes, are entitled, and they should have this knowledge about the basic workings of the institutions that determine their lives. And I'm not asking people or the teachers to teach the students of higher secondary of higher school of high school to uh, to understand the workings of capitalism or socialism or any such complex phenomena, but a basic understanding of the workings of the real world, which intrinsically include an understanding of the social, economic, and political world, must be included in the curriculum. That must be a part of the pedagogy. And Varoufakis succeeds to a large extent in reaching, in delivering these concepts to the people who are devoid of an understanding of the complex phenomena that we are speaking about. And he does so in a very lucid way. And he also, when he explains the contradictions within the system that we are living in, he doesn't paint a pessimistic picture. He gives us an understanding. He talks to us about his analysis of the system. At the same time, he urges us to break away from these structures. He urges us to take a step back from these structures and to look at the larger phenomena, to have an idea of the big picture. And it's important because there is this increasing tendency towards youth, probably in my generation, towards being apolitical. And this is going to be dangerous, especially in such a polarized world. Being apolitical necessarily means that we are standing with the status quo. And that is worse than, being conservative or being a right-wing fascist supporter. Apolitical or the apathy about the political, economic, and social structures that intrinsically are linked to our lives. It's much more prevalent in the youth of this generation, of my generation. And he addresses it succinctly. He asks people not to be apolitical. He urges us to take a look at the structures, to break away from the determining effects of these structures, and to probably also utilize and exercise our agency as individuals to look at to look at the working of this complex engine that he calls as the economy. And it's relevant to me right now in 2021, especially in three senses. In the last year, we have seen this unprecedented crisis in the health sector, and we have seen so many people who were suffering to even get a bed in a hospital. When the second wave hit us, it got worse. All of us were thinking, why did India, one of the greatest countries in terms of both its political and economic institutions, how is India suffering this fate? And how so, even after the glorious privatization that came with all of the promises after 1990? That is one of the questions that haunt me, and I probably think others as well. Like, how did such a crisis happen? And not just because of the intensity of the disease, but also because of a lack of management and lack of infrastructure and resources that was so prevalent in our country. And also, it's important to understand the commodification of everything, even life-saving drugs. In the context of COVID, it's remdesivir or of the vaccines that we are getting. It's not for free. Like, even though they are so important, crucial, and life-saving for the existence and for the continuance of our physical wellness, even though they are so crucial and probably basic necessities, we are forced to pay a price to such things, or I should say commodities, since they are now only being sold. Another point of consideration here, I think, should be the recent farm loss and the broader agrarian crisis that underpin the protests that are going right now. I think when he talks about the contradictions of capitalism and how commodification of everything has affected a lot of people, we must not forget the effect. We must not forget the effect this LPG era had on farmers, with the increasing suicides that we have been witnessing since 1997. there is no explanation. While I agree that LPG has brought with it a lot of benefits to the middle class, probably, and also development in a few sectors, but it does not explain the framework of liberalism, does not offer us an explanation about the poverty that has deepened, about the agrarian crisis that has been ever increasing since the 1990s, or probably from the 1997. So that is one question that keeps haunting me. And the last, I think we must not forget about the increasing unemployment. And I think this is something that Varoufakis also deals with in his book when he says that the more the society gets technologically advanced, the more is the risk that people would increasingly become jobless or underemployed for that matter. And he says, rather, I think, ironically, that it's the fault of humans that they have this urge to eat and maintain themselves. And thus, they are ready to sell their labor for whatever price is offered to them. And if that price is lower than what they're expecting or lower than what is actually deserved by them, the basic human necessities, or such as having a shelter, or for fulfilling our physical needs, such as food and water, all of these things, they compel workers to agree to consent to sell their labor for far lesser prices than they deserve. And this is the trend. This is deepening poverty, and the unemployment rate that is right now prevalent. It must make us wonder, why is so much poverty? Why is there so much the desperation among the youth, among the workers about jobs, despite the rosy picture that capitalism has painted? So I think I'd conclude here. Thank you. I must thank Hyderabad Book Trust for giving me this opportunity. And also the speakers who have spoken before me have made it easier for me to build right into the top, because they've given such a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Datri. We had Arnav, now we had Datri. Hugely impressed. I'm sure if Varoufakis could have listened to this, he would have felt happy that the book that he had written is being read 5 years later by young people in India, and especially Datri, that without in a sense, the book has been written for people like you, who don't have an economics background, who are yet willing to engage with it and work through the arguments. You have really covered a huge area from the syllabus, the problems with our syllabus, then about, of course, the workings of capitalism, then, situating it in the pandemic. I don't know if it's possible, but if Hyderabad Book Trust can send a recording of this to Varoufakis, I think he would be happy to know that it's being discussed years later and across thousands of kilometers, that it's being discussed by young people. And it's found a place in the minds of young people. And I hope both of your interventions will, in a way, spread the word, among of the book, among others like you. I would now like to invite Sudhakaran, who has translated the book, to speak a bit. It's fascinating. I'm as fascinated that he's not an economist. He doesn't have economics background. His profession, he's a software engineer. And yet he has taken the effort, and obviously he's interested. He has read the English and translated the book. I wonder if he can talk to us about, one, how he took up this project, two, the challenges he faced in translate. And mind you, this book was written in Greek, then it was translated in English, and now that has been translated into Telugu. Sudhakaran, I hope you are here. Is he here?
I am there, Rob.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Unmute. Hello? Yeah. Am I audible now?
Can somebody unmute him? Yeah. Can
Yeah,
you?
I think.
Yeah.
You are audible.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ramanohar Reddy garu and Jairam Ramesh garu, and thank you Arnav and Dhatri for this wonderful introduction. I think ఈ బుక్ మొదటిసారి ఇంగ్లీష్లో వచ్చినప్పుడు I read that and then I was hugely impressed. That's when I approached a common friend with Geeta and then probably suggested probably this is a book that should be translated into Telugu. And then Geeta called me, అది మీరే చేయొచ్చు కదా ట్రాన్స్లేషన్ అని గీత అడిగారు. నాకు పనుల ఒత్తిడిలో అండ్ ఆల్సో ప్రాబ్లీ I'm also lazy. It took so long for me to do this, and Geeta, I should thank her for being so patient, for letting me take this long to complete this translation. Adi, and I as I read it and reread it while doing the translation and all, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the book subject is very, very fascinating. బుక్ గురించి మాట్లాడారు కాబట్టి నేను 1-2 చిన్న విషయాలు అంటే నా వైపు నుంచి నేను చెప్పాలని అనుకుంటున్నాను. దాదాపు ఇట్ ఈస్ అబౌట్ ఆల్మోస్ట్ క్లోజ్ టు 250 years నౌ. ఇప్పటికి ఆడమ్ స్మిత్ వెల్త్ ఆఫ్ నేషన్స్ 1776 అనుకుంటాను బుక్ పబ్లిష్ అయింది. ఆ బుక్ లో వన్ ఆఫ్ ది కీ పాయింట్స్ దట్ హీ టాక్స్ అబౌట్ ఈస్ ది అల్టిమేట్ సోర్స్ ఆఫ్ వెల్త్. సంపదకి చాలా అంతిమ మూలం అంతా కూడా డివిజన్ ఆఫ్ లేబర్ లో ఉన్నది, శ్రమ విభజనలో ఉన్నది అని పాయింట్ చెప్తారు. ఈ శ్రమ విభజన 3 రకాలుగా ఈ ఉత్పాదక బేసికల్ గా ఈ సంపదకు మూలం అంతా కూడా సంపదను పెంచుకోవటానికి మూలం అంతా ఉత్పాదకతని ప్రొడక్టివిటీ పెంచుకోవటము. ఈ ప్రొడక్టివిటీ పెంచుకోవటం అన్న దాని వెనుక చాలా ముఖ్యమైనది శ్రమ విభజన, డివిజన్ ఆఫ్ లేబర్ అని చెప్తారు. ఈ డివిజన్ ఆఫ్ లేబర్ లో కూడా 3 అంశాలు పనిచేస్తాయి. ఒకటి ఉత్పత్తి క్రమాన్ని ఈ వేరు భాగాలుగా ముక్కలుగా స్పెషలైజేషన్, ఈ డివిజన్ ఆఫ్ లేబర్ దీంతో ఒకే పని చేయటం ద్వారా పదే చేయటం ద్వారా ఒక రకమైనటువంటి ఎఫిషియన్సీ వస్తుంది. రెండవది పనిని విడగొట్టి వేరు స్పెషలైజేషన్ తీసుకురావటం వల్ల కూడా ఆ ప్రాసెస్ మరింత వేగవంతం అవుతుంది. మూడవది ఈ మూడో పాయింట్ బేసికల్ గా ఈ శ్రమ విభజన ఈ దీంతో పాటు ఉండేటువంటి విషయం స్పెషలైజేషన్ తో పాటు ఇది విడివిడిగా విడగొట్టడం వల్ల దీన్ని ఆటోమేట్ చేయడానికి మరింతగా యాంత్రీకరించడానికి కూడా అవకాశం ఏర్పడుతుంది. ఈ 3 కారణాలతోటి ఈ శ్రమ విభజన అన్నది ఉత్పాదకతను పెంచడానికి దారితీస్తుంది. ఈ ఉత్పాదకతను పెంచుకోవటమే సమాజంలో సంపదను పెంచడానికి దారితీస్తుంది అనేది ముఖ్యమైనటువంటి విషయం ఆయన చెప్పేది. ఇది దానికి ఒక మామూలు ఉదాహరణగా గుండు సూది తయారు చేయడం అనేది తీసుకుంటారు. ఈ గుండు సూది తయారు చేయడం అనేది శ్రమ విభజనని దీన్ని ఈ ప్రాసెస్ కి అప్లై చేయడం ద్వారా ఉత్పాదకతను ఎలా పెరుగుతుంది అనే ఎగ్జాంపుల్ చెప్తూ, ఆ రోజు ఉన్నటువంటి పరిస్థితుల్లో ఒక మనిషి దాదాపు 20 గుండు సూదులు తయారు చేయగలుగుతాడు, పిన్స్ తయారు చేయగలుగుతాడని చెప్తారు. ఆ తర్వాత ఈ శ్రమ విభజన దీంతో తీసుకురావటం వల్ల, నైపుణ్యం ఇదంతా తీసుకురావటం వల్ల దగ్గర 10 మంది మనుషులు రోజుకి 48,000 గుండు సూదులు తయారు చేయగలుగుతారని ఆడమ్ స్మిత్ ఆ ఉదాహరణలో చెప్తారు. అంటే ఒక మనిషి మామూలుగా ఈ శ్రమ విభజన ఈ ప్రిన్సిపల్స్ అప్లై చేయకుండా రోజుకి 20 గుండు సూదులు తయారు చేసే మనిషి ఈ శ్రమ విభజన ఈ స్పెషలైజేషన్ వీటన్నిటిని తీసుకురావటం వల్ల రోజుకి 4,800 గుండు సూదులు తయారు చేయగలుగుతాడని చెప్తారు. ఇది ఒక ముఖ్యమైన లెక్క. ఇది తర్వాత దాదాపు ఒక 50 సంవత్సరాలు దాటిన తర్వాత 1932లో ఒక పరిశీలన చేశారు. దాంట్లో చేసిన లెక్క ప్రకారం ఎంతవరకు ఈ ఉత్పాదకత పెంచుకోవటం అనేటువంటి ప్రాసెస్ లో ఎక్కడి వరకు వచ్చిందని అంటే 4,800 గుండు సూదులు తయారు చేసే దగ్గర నుంచి ఉత్పాదకత 50 సంవత్సరాల ప్రాసెస్ లో 8,000కి పెరిగింది అని చెప్తారు. మళ్ళీ 1980లో కేంబ్రిడ్జ్ యూనివర్సిటీ ఎకనమిస్ట్ క్లిఫర్డ్ ప్రాటన్ ఆయన మళ్ళీ ఒక పరిశీలన చేశారు. దీంట్లో తేలింది ఏమిటంటే ఒక మనిషి రోజుకి 8 లక్షల గుండు సూదులు తయారు చేయగలిగే స్థితికి వచ్చిందని. అంటే 1776లో ఒక మనిషి మామూలుగా యాంత్రీకరణ ఇవన్నీ లేకుండా 20 గుండు సూదులు తయారు చేయగలిగే ఉత్పాదకత నుంచి మానవ సమాజ అభివృద్ధి క్రమంలో 1980 నాటికి దాదాపు 200 సంవత్సరాలకు పైగా 250 సంవత్సరాలు ఆ ప్రాసెస్ లో ఇన్ని రెట్లు 8 లక్షల గుండు సూదులు తయారు చేయగలిగేంత స్థాయికి ఎదిగింది. ఇంత స్థాయికి ఉత్పాదకత పెరిగిన తర్వాత కూడా ఒక ముఖ్యమైన ప్రశ్న, ఈ పుస్తకంలో మొదటి ప్రశ్న అదే మొదలు పెడతారు. వాళ్ళ అమ్మాయి అడిగింది, అందరికీ వచ్చే ప్రశ్న, ఎందుకు ప్రపంచంలో ఇంత అసమానతలు ఉన్నాయి? మళ్ళీ ఈ ప్రశ్నే మొదలుపెట్టి దాదాపు పుస్తకానికి ప్రాతిపదిక, పుస్తకంలో ఉన్న విషయాలంతా కూడా దీనికి సమాధానం చెప్పడానికి ప్రయత్నంగానే తిరుగుతూ ఉంటుంది. ఈ అసమానతలకి భౌగోళికమైనవో లేదా ఇతరత్ర వైవిధ్యాలు, డైవర్సిటీస్, వేరు తేడాలు ఇలాంటివి కాదు. ఇది ఒక ముఖ్యమైనటువంటి ప్రశ్న. ఇది ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థతోటి రాజకీయాలతోటి ముడిపడి ఉన్నటువంటి ప్రశ్న అని చెప్తారు. ఈ ప్రశ్న గురించే మళ్ళీ మనం మాట్లాడుకోవాలంటే ఇంకొక రాక్ స్టార్ ఎకనమిస్ట్ థామస్ పికెటీ కూడా ఉన్నారు. ఆయన 2020లో కూడా ఇంగ్లీష్లో పుస్తకం వచ్చింది, అంతకుముందు కూడా రాశారు ఎకానమీలో ఇన్ఈక్వాలిటీస్ గురించి. అది కూడా ఒక ముఖ్యమైనటువంటి ప్రశ్న మనం వేసుకోవాల్సినటువంటి అవసరం ఉంది. 1980 నుంచి ఇండియాలో అసమానతల పరిస్థితి తీసుకుంటే థామస్ పికెటీ వేసిన లెక్కల ప్రకారం 1980లో భారతదేశంలో ఉన్నటువంటి సంపాదన ఉన్న పరుల్లో అత్యున్నతమైనటువంటి స్థాయిలో ఉన్నటువంటి టాప్ 10 పీపుల్ కనుక తీసుకున్నట్టయితే 1980లో అది దాదాపు 35% ఆ ప్రాంతంలో ఉండింది మొత్తం జాతీయ ఆదాయంలో వాళ్ళ భాగం. అది దాదాపు ఇప్పటికి 2018 నాటికి మొత్తం ప్రపంచంలోనే ఇది భారతదేశం దీంట్లో ఒక పై మెట్టును ఉన్నదని చెప్తారు. ఏంటంటే ఈ టాప్ 10% చేతిలో ఉన్నటువంటి సంపద లేదా జాతీయ ఆదాయంలో ఇది 55% ఉంది. ఇది ఆ రకంగా పోల్చుకుంటే ఈవెన్ అమెరికా తోటి మిగతా దేశాలతోటి కూడా పోల్చుకుంటే ఇండియానే ఇంకా ఎక్కువ ఉంది. టాప్ 10% చేతిలో ఇవాళ జాతీయ ఆదాయంలో 55% వాళ్ళ చేతుల్లోనే ఉన్నదని చెప్తారు. అట్లాగే టాప్ 1% ఆక్స్ఫామ్ లెక్కలు తీసుకున్నా కానీ టాప్ 1% చేతిలో మిగతా 70% మంది మొత్తం పూరెస్ట్ పీపుల్లో ఉన్నటువంటి 70% మంది వాళ్ళ మొత్తం సంపదతోటి ఆదాయంతో పోల్చుకుంటే కూడా ఇంకా చాలా రెట్లు ఉందని చెప్తారు. ఎందుకని ఇంత అసమానతలు? ఈ అసమానతల్ని చాలా సూటిగా చెప్పుకోవాలనంటే ఇది పేదరికం అన్నది కేవలం ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థ ఉత్పాదకతకు సంబంధించినటువంటి సమస్య కాదు, ఇది రాజకీయాలకు సంబంధించిన సమస్య. మళ్ళీ థామస్ పికెటీ మాటల్ని చెప్పుకోవాలంటే స్వీడన్ ఉదాహరణ చెప్తారు. 1911లో స్వీడన్ ఉన్నటువంటి పరిస్థితి, అక్కడ ఒక మనిషి ఒక ఓటు అన్నది లేదు ఆ రోజు. అప్పటికి దాదాపు చాలా చోట్ల ఒక్క మనిషికే వాళ్ళకు ఉన్నటువంటి సంపద రీత్యా వాళ్ళు ఓటు వేసే దాంట్లో కొన్ని చోట్ల 50% పైన ఓట్లు కూడా ఉన్నాయి, ఒక్క మనిషికే ఉన్నటువంటి సందర్భం కూడా ఉన్నది. అట్లాంటి స్వీడన్ మొత్తం యూరోప్ లో ఆ రోజు దాదాపు 100-110 సంవత్సరాల క్రితం తీసుకున్నట్టయితే యూరోప్ మొత్తంలో కూడా అత్యంత అసమానతలు ఉన్నటువంటి దేశం. అక్కడ నుంచి స్వీడన్ ఇవాళ పరిణామం చెందినటువంటి తీరు, ఇది వాళ్ళు రాజకీయాలతోటి పొలిటికల్ మొబిలైజేషన్ తోటి ముడిపడి ఉన్నది. మిగతా విషయాలు రాజకీయాలు, సోషలిజం, కమ్యూనిజం, ఇది ఎవరు ఏం చేస్తారనే విషయాలన్నీ పక్కన పెట్టినప్పటికీ ఈ పేదరికాన్ని అసమానతలు, ఈ పేదరికాన్ని అధిగమించడం అనేటువంటిది ఒక రాజకీయమైనటువంటి సమస్య, రాజకీయమైనటువంటి చర్చ. ఇది ఏ మేరకు దీన్ని మనం అందరం అర్థం చేసుకుంటాము, ఈ ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థను అర్థం చేసుకుంటాము, ఈ ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థ ఎలా పనిచేస్తుంది అనేటువంటిది అర్థం చేసుకుంటాము. దీన్ని ఈ విషయాన్ని ఆర్థికవేత్తలకే వదిలివేయటం కాకుండా రాజకీయాల చర్చలోకి ఏ మేరకు తీసుకొస్తాము, రాజకీయాల చర్చలోకి తీసుకొచ్చిన తర్వాత రాజకీయ విధాన నిర్ణయాల పరిధిలోకి ఏ రకంగా తీసుకొస్తాం, పొలిటికల్ పాలసీ మేకింగ్ లోకి తీసుకొచ్చిన తర్వాత ఏ మేరకు దీన్ని ఆచరణలోకి, ఇంప్లిమెంటేషన్లోకి తీసుకురాగలుగుతాము. ఇవి చాలా ముఖ్యమైనటువంటి విషయాలని అనుకుంటాను. దీనికి ఎవరు ఏం చదువుకున్నారనే దాంతో సంబంధం లేకపోయినప్పటికీ లేని విషయం, ఇది అందరూ ఆ మేరకు అర్థం చేసుకోవాల్సినటువంటి విషయం, నేర్చుకోవాల్సినటువంటి విషయం అని అనిపించి నేను దీన్ని అనువాదం చేద్దామని అనుకున్నాను. నాకు అవకాశం ఇచ్చినందుకు హైదరాబాద్ బుక్ ట్రస్ట్ కి, గీత అట్లాగే ఈ పుస్తకాన్ని అందంగా తీసుకురావడానికి కష్టపడి పనిచేసిన అనంత్కి అందరికీ కృతజ్ఞతలు. థ్యాంక్ యూ.
Thank you, Sudhakar. That was quite interesting what your motivation was and your understanding of economics as well. Again, I think Varoufakis would be happy to meet you and talk to you about how you came to develop this understanding of economics. Now we are open. We can have questions from those who are attending. Please direct your questions to whoever you feel would like to answer them.
Sir, 1, 2, 3 actually has raised already.
Yeah. Now I don't see in there 1, 2. It's been deleted. I don't know if.
1, 2, 3 can question.
Yeah. Is she or he there? 1, 2, 3. I don't see the hand. I don't see. Maybe logged out.
ఎవరైనా ప్రశ్నలు వేయదలుచుకుంటే వాళ్ళు రియాక్షన్ దగ్గరికి వెళ్ళి హ్యాండ్ రేస్ చేస్తే అడ్మిన్ వాళ్ళని అలౌ చేస్తాడు. అట్లాగే ఎవరికి ప్రశ్న వేస్తున్నారో కూడా చెప్పి వాళ్ళతో మాట్లాడితే మనము ఈ ప్రశ్నల సమాధానాల సెషన్ని మనం ఒక 10-15 నిమిషాలు కొనసాగించవచ్చు.
I think everybody is so impressed by Arnav and Datri, they have little to add.
I'd like to ask Jairam Ramesh a question.
Yeah, please.
Can
you identify yourself, please?
My name is Sashi Kumar.
Yeah.
Ever since we have become so integrated with the global economy and the global systems, today the feeling is on the economic policy or on the economic front, regardless of who comes to power, people really don't have choice, and that we are just pawns in some global game. So politics is being played out on other things, but on the economic issues, really there's nothing to differentiate between what different people are offering, because everyone is so constrained in choices by whatever is happening globally. Do you think there's a possibility that political parties can differentiate from each other radically from the point of view of appeal or something like that?
Well, I think the scope for a radical differentiation on economic policy is very, very narrow. Very narrow. I think the scope for differentiation really is on social issues, issues of identity, issues of nationalism, issues of managing a diverse society. Frankly, I do not think that the economic choices are very sharp. There are variations on a theme. The BJP will privatize more aggressively than the Congress. But that's variations on a theme. So I think the answer to your question really is that the path was set 30 years ago. Now, whether we move fast on that path, whether we change gears on that path, whether we accelerate on that path, depends on the political regime. But there's no path change. There's no dramatic shift in the road that we have taken.
If I may just ask a supplement, if the experience is that this path actually is accentuating inequalities in society, and I mean, that's what seems to be the experience. So do you see any way of politics addressing this whole issue of inequality, economic inequality?
Well, many years ago, 40 years ago, the great Indian economist Shukumai Chakravarti wrote, gave a series of lectures, which was then subsequently published in the form of a book called Development Planning, which remains, to my mind, the single best introduction to the whole issue of planning in India. And one of the points that Shukumai Chakravarti made is that there is now an emerging fiscal sociology, which constrains the state from addressing problems of inequality through the tax system, for example. I mean, Piketty was mentioned in our discussion. The Piketty type recommendations, which are needed to address problems of growing inequality, are constrained by considerations of fiscal sociology. Is very difficult. I found it very difficult to convince my own government. For example, in the 8 years that I was minister, it had something to do with economic policy, not directly, but I had a very difficult time convincing my own government to consider an inheritance tax, for example. Which is one of the important ways of addressing the issue of inequality. Increasing tax rates, for example. I don't see that. I don't see any political party having the appetite for increasing tax rates. In fact, the movement is just in the opposite direction. So, we seem to be in a situation where, the differentiators of in politics are not so much economics as much as the larger social questions.
We have
Yeah.
Chandrasekhar Allur, who has raised his hand.
And then Bhargava, sir.
And then Bhargava.
Yes,
Yes.
sir. Yes.
ఈ చర్చలో అంతా గమనిస్తే నేను ఆ పుస్తకం చదవలేదు, పుస్తకం చదివే ప్రయత్నం చేస్తాను. సోవియట్ ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్, చైనా ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ని ఈ రచయిత తన యొక్క పరిగణలోకి తీసుకున్నారా? సోవియట్ యూనియన్లోను చైనాలోను సోషలిజం స్థాపించబడింది అని చెప్పేసి క్లైమ్స్ చేయబడి ఉన్నాయి. మరి ఆ సొసైటీలు సోషలిజం సాధించబడిన తర్వాత తిరిగి, అంటే సోషలిజం అంటే ఇన్వర్టెడ్ కామాస్లో సాధించబడినటువంటివి తిరిగి క్యాపిటలిజం వైపు నడిచాయి. చైనాలో కూడా సోషలిజం వచ్చిన తర్వాత మళ్ళీ అది క్యాపిటలిజంలోకి వెళ్ళిపోయి. మరి ఎలాంటి సోషలిజం ఇన్ఈక్వాలిటీని తొలగించేటువంటి పరిష్కారాలని ఈ పుస్తకంలో ఆ రచయిత సూచించే ప్రయత్నం చేసుకున్నాడని ఒక ప్రశ్న. రెండవది వచ్చేసి సుధాకిరణ్ గారు థామస్ పికెటీని గురించి ప్రస్తావన చేసి ఉన్నారు. థామస్ పికెటీ ఇంతకుముందు జయరాం రమేష్ చెప్పినట్లుగా మన ముందు ఇస్తున్నటువంటి పరిష్కారాలు ఏంటి అంటే, సమాజంలో ఉండేటువంటి కొన్ని వర్గాల పైన ట్యాక్సెస్ అనేటువంటివి పెంచుకుంటూ పోవడం అనేటువంటిది అసమానతను తొలగించేందుకు పరిష్కారం అని చెప్పేసి థామస్ పికెటీ సూచించడం జరుగుతూ వస్తుంది. సో థామస్ పికెటీ సూచించేటువంటి పరిష్కారాలకి ఈ రచయిత సూచిస్తున్న పరిష్కారాలకు మధ్య ఏమైనా సామ్యత ఉన్నదా, లేదా పరస్పరం విరుద్ధమైనటువంటి పరిష్కారాలని థామస్ పికెటీ ఈ రచయిత సూచిస్తున్నారా అని చెప్పేసి నేను ఈ చర్చలో ఈ అంశాన్ని ప్రవేశపెట్టేందుకు ప్రయత్నం చేస్తున్నాను. ధన్యవాదాలు.
థ్యాంక్ యూ. భార్గవ గారు ఉన్నారు.
Bhargava, unmute and please.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. My question is again directed to Mr. Jairam Ramesh. I think while answering to the question posed by Mr. Shashi, you were concurring with his opinion that there is not much of a space left for political maneuver, economic maneuver, because more or less the path is set, and any political dispensation that comes to power in anywhere in the world can only make subtle variations here and there, some tinkering, but not in any significant way it can change its course. That's what you're saying. I think the kind of political economy that unfolded after Reagan and Margaret Thatcher ushered into this so-called neoliberal phase of capitalism, um, pushed across the world through Bretton Woods institutions and all that. And it appeared that politics, economic systems are globally monitored, are globally regulated according to a set of rules agreed upon by all the countries. That kind of a atmosphere was there. But don't we see there is a change that this whole edifice of neoliberal policy framework coming into shambles after 2008 in their own countries, where they are unable to find a solution, and it is not going away despite all kinds of tinkering they're doing and all kinds of wishing away they're doing. It is refusing to go away. And writing is so clear on the wall that they have to adopt to some kind of welfare state to come back to reviving economy, to generate demand in the market. But now neoliberalism from a policy framework has converted itself into an ideological framework, an ideological dogma. Is it not the main case for them to not to think rationally, even to defend capitalism, even to protect capitalism from political upheaval that this crisis can give rise to? Actually, it is giving rise to such political disturbances in other forms, like rising of right-wing politics and authoritarianism, because this neoliberal dogma is refusing to take call and adjusting its policy framework and refusing to go back to some kind of welfare state. So this refusal to see the writing on the wall, is it not causing serious political disturbances? Maybe most of the political disturbances that are happening are more towards right, but nonetheless they are political in nature, and they are affecting the way the polity is being governed across the world. With one example we have already there in our own country. So I think politics is again coming back to center, and it is going to there is a possibility for political variation and to affect economies, and to bring back economies from the only path or the final path, so-called final path on which it is embarking now. I think the possibility is there. That's what I think. I just want to know your take.
Well, if you read Varoufakis's book, it's very interesting. Varoufakis was an advocate of privatization when he was finance minister. The point of difference between him and his prime minister was on debt rescheduling. Largely, that was the dispute between him and the German finance minister, between him and the IMF. It was on debt rescheduling, and it was on the conditionalities associated with the IMF assistance. But on many elements of economic policy, you would call Varoufakis a neoliberal, because he was, saying that the state has demonstrated incapacity for running enterprises, and he was an advocate of privatization. So we make much of Varoufakis. He's become a cult hero figure, but when you read his book, you will see that his position is quite nuanced. So I don't know. I mean, I really, however much we may want to make dramatic changes, the scope for these dramatic changes, in my view, the political economy will not permit. unless there is a crisis. For example, in the COVID crisis, one of the fallouts of the COVID crisis is that it will lead. I'm pretty confident it will lead to a very substantial increase in public investment in health. Something that has been talked about for the last 20 years, but not accomplished. It requires a COVID-19, we will see the results of all these changes a couple of years from now. So I think in terms of addressing inequalities, certainly education, inequality in education, inequality in health, are fundamental determinants of inequality. Of course, in India, we have other determinants of inequality. We have the caste determinant, we have, asset ownership determinant, but health and education are something that can be controlled through the instruments of public investment and taxation. That, I think, in the case of health, certainly a shift will definitely come about as a consequence of the trauma that we have gone through in the last 15 months. But if you're asking me whether we are going to completely, change the fundamental anchors, which is openness, which is international trade, which is foreign investment, which is shrinking the role of the state in economic activities, I don't think those are going to be challenged. They're going to be challenged on the margin, but they're not going to be challenged fundamentally.
Are there any other questions? So should we close now?
సిహెచ్ సుబ్బరాజు గారు, మీరు లైవ్ లో ఉంటే క్వశ్చన్ మీరు అడగచ్చు. ఇక్కడ ఫేస్బుక్ లో అడుగుతున్నారు మీరు, ఇక్కడ లైవ్ లో ఉంటే ఇక్కడ అడగచ్చు. సుబ్బరాజు సిహెచ్. ఓకే సార్.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been a very interesting discussion.
My question has not been considered. You see, what I asked is that the Soviet and Chinese experience of socialism has been taken into consideration by the writer in his writer, because they have attempted to make the economy more socialist, but they couldn't do it, and they have gone back. So, will they share something? Does the book discuss about this experience of the Soviet Union and China?
Not that I recall. No, it doesn't discuss Soviet Union and China. It's the focus is really on European market economy, and explaining how it works and bringing out its main problems, mainly to do with inequality and debt. He doesn't discuss, and unless Arnav and Dhatru who read the book more recently can correct me. As far as I can recall, it does not discuss those aspects. Yes, I think now we can close discussion. It was very interesting. 90 minutes. I was not sure whether we would be able to have a discussion going for an hour, but it's gone well beyond that. Thanks especially to the two young people, Arnav and Dhatri, who in some ways have shown that, I think both of them spoke about young people being apolitical, or the notion that they're apolitical, but no, I think that many young people are thinking about these questions, are thinking about these issues, and they are very much alive to what is happening around them. Unfortunately, we have people like Varoufakis to explain things and engage with them. There is this book, again, if I can show it, it's available in the chat box. The Flipkart address and the Hyderabad Book Trust address has been listed. So those of you who would like to purchase the book, please do so. I'd like to end by thanking Mr. Jairam Ramesh for taking the time and both introducing the book and engaging with the questions, and also Hyderabad Book Trust for organizing something quite different from what we are used to, in fact, in many book events. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. ఇవాళ యానిస్ వెరిఫకస్ మరముచ్చట పుస్తక ఆవిష్కరణ సభ వెబినార్ ఇది హైదరాబాద్ బుక్ ట్రస్ట్ నిర్వహించింది. ఈ పుస్తక ఆవిష్కరణ వెబినార్కి సంబంధించి అడిగిన వెంటనే మాట్లాడేందుకు ఒప్పుకున్న జయరాం రమేష్ గారికి, రాజ్యసభ సభ్యులు వారికి, అలాగే రామ్ మనోహర్ రెడ్డి గారికి అధ్యక్షత వహించవలసిందిగా కోరిన వెంటనే అంగీకరించినటువంటి రామ్ మనోహర్ రెడ్డి గారికి, అట్లాగే ఇది ఒక తండ్రి తన కూతురితోటి జరిగినటువంటి సంభాషణ కాబట్టి యంగ్ జనరేషన్ ఈ పుస్తకానికి సంబంధించినటువంటి ప్రధానమైనటువంటి పాఠకులుగా ఈ ప్రస్తుతాన్ని రూపొందించాము, తీర్చిదిద్దాము. ఆ ధోరణిలోనే, ఆ శైలిలోనే ఈ పుస్తకాన్ని సుధాకరన్ కూడా అనువదించాడు. ఆ యంగ్స్టర్స్ని ఉద్దేశించి మనము ఈ పుస్తకాన్ని తయారు చేసినప్పుడు, రూపొందించినప్పుడు ఈ ప్యానెల్లో యంగ్స్టర్స్కు ఉండడం చాలా ఇంపార్టెంట్ అనుకున్నప్పుడు ధాత్రి, అర్ణవ్ని అడిగాము. వాళ్ళిద్దరూ కూడా మాట్లాడడానికి ఒప్పుకున్నారు. వాళ్ళకు కూడా ధన్యవాదాలు, హెచ్పిటి ధన్యవాదాలు. నిజానికి ఈ సాయంత్రాన్ని వాళ్ళిద్దరూ దే హ్యావ్ స్టోలన్ ద షో. వాళ్ళకి సంబంధించినటువంటి అభినందనల వర్షం, ప్రతి ఒక్కరూ వాళ్ళనే అభినందిస్తున్నారు. ఈ ఇద్దరు యువకులు ఈ పుస్తకాన్ని చదివి అద్భుతంగా లోతైన విశ్లేషణ, తమ విశ్లేషణ తెలిపినందుకు, ఈ పుస్తకం పబ్లిష్ చేసినందుకు లేదా రాసినందుకు కూడా సార్థకత ఏర్పడినట్టు అనిపించింది. మానవ సమాజంలో ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థకు సంబంధించినటువంటి విషయాలు ఆర్థిక నిపుణులు మాత్రమే మాట్లాడాలి అనేటువంటి ఒక మిత్ని డీమిస్టిఫై చేసి, అంటే డిస్మాంటిల్ చేస్తాడు యానిస్ వెరిఫకస్. ఆ ధోరణిలోనే ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థ అనేటువంటిది మన జీవితాలను ప్రభావితం చేసేటువంటి ఒక మూలమైన అంశం. ఇది పివోటల్ ఇష్యూ, కీ ఇష్యూ. దీని చుట్టే మిగతా అన్ని సంబంధాలు కూడా మనకు పెనవేసుకుని ఉంటాయి లేదా రూపుదిద్దుకుంటాయి. కాబట్టి ఆర్థికపరమైనటువంటి విషయాలు ఆర్థికపరమైన నిపుణులకు సంబంధించినటువంటి విషయం కాదు, అది అందరి విషయం అనేటువంటి ధోరణిని చెప్పడానికి తన కూతురితో సంభాషణనే ఒక పుస్తకంగా తయారు చేశాడు. అలాగే ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థకు ఇంతకుముందు సుధాకిరణ్ కానీ వక్తలు కానీ చెప్పినట్టు ఉత్పాదకత అనేటువంటిదే ప్రధానమైనటువంటి విషయం. ఈ ఉత్పాదకతలో, మానవ నాగరికతలో ఉత్పాదకతను పెంచినటువంటిది యానిస్ వెరిఫకస్ చెప్పేటప్పుడు steam engine invention that made a big difference in the entire economy of or the history of economy. మన ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థ యొక్క చరిత్రను చూసినప్పుడు స్టీమ్ ఇంజిన్ ముందు, స్టీమ్ ఇంజిన్ తర్వాత, అంటే స్టీమ్ ఇంజిన్ మనం తెలుగులో మర అంటాము, అంటే యంత్రాన్ని మర అంటాము. ఆ మరకు ముందు ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థలు, మర తర్వాత ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థలు, ఇప్పుడు ఆర్టిఫిషియల్ ఇంటెలిజెన్స్ యుగంలో, డిజిటల్ ఎరాలో ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థలకు సంబంధించినటువంటి విశ్లేషణను చాలా పురాణ గాథలు, ఎగ్జాంపుల్స్, పద్యాలు, నాటకాలు, కథలు, గ్రీకు పురాణాలు, గ్రీకు వ్యక్తులు, పాత్రలు తోటి తీసుకొని తన కూతురుతోటి ఈ పుస్తకం ఆశాంతం చర్చిస్తూ పోతాడు. స్టీమ్ ఇంజన్ అనేటువంటిది లేదా తను ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థని ఇంజన్, సొసైటీలో ఇంజనే ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థ, ఎకానమీ ఇస్ ద ఇంజన్ ఆఫ్ సొసైటీ అంటాడు. కాబట్టి ఈ రెండు మెటఫర్స్ని ఉపయోగించుకొని ఈ పుస్తకానికి మరముచ్చట అని పెట్టాము. మరముచ్చట బ్లర్బ్ కూడా ఉన్నది దీంట్లో. ఓ కూతురితో ఓ తండ్రి ఆర్థిక వ్యవస్థ గురించి జరిపిన మాటామంతి. దిస్ ఇస్ అ లిటరల్ ట్రాన్స్లేషన్ ఆఫ్ ద టైటిల్, టాకింగ్ టు మై డాటర్ అబౌట్ ది ఎకానమీ. ఈ సాయంత్రం చాలా అద్భుతమైన చర్చని, ఈ పుస్తకానికి సంబంధించినటువంటి రిలవెన్స్ని అందరు స్పీకర్స్ చెప్పి ఈ పుస్తకాన్ని మరింత మందికి చేరే విధంగా ఈ సాయంత్రాన్ని, ఈ వెబినార్ని నిర్వహించినందుకు, మాట్లాడినందుకు హైదరాబాద్ బుక్ ట్రస్ట్ మనస్ఫూర్తిగా ధన్యవాదాలు తెలుపుతుంది. థ్యాంక్ యూ అలాట్.
Thank you very much, Hyderabad Book Trust.
Thank you.